Menopause, exercise, and me. This is not medical advice. This is my story. And if I had a time machine, I think I would be tempted to go back to 2009 and have a stern word with myself. At the time, I was writing my dissertation, The Psychological Effects of the Self-Determination Theory-Based Exercise Intervention for Peri- and Postmenopausal Women. Little did I know then at the age of 47 what was ahead of me. So for those of you who don't know me, I have been most of my life a fitness instructor. Here is me back in the day of Jane Fonda when leg warmers were the thing to have. When I started my dissertation, what happened was I used to do a lot of personal training with women, and they used to come to me because they were putting on weight. And I was thinking this would be a great subject for my menopause, because I took the stance that menopause provided a good opportunity for change, that people were motivated. It was a driver to improve health without really realising what menopause was. And I think I could write a much better dissertation now that I'm 59. You've probably listened today as you are either A, going through the menopause and want to find out anything that will help you manage the changes you're going through, or B, you love exercise and you hope your love of exercise will help you manage the menopause, or maybe C, your wife, your partner, your colleague is going through the menopause and you hope to find out something that will help them. Whichever it is, I'm hoping this next 10 minutes will give you some useful and practical information that would be of benefit. Like many of you, I feel the menopause is almost like a dirty secret that was once mental health. But we know things can change, and with a huge increase in numbers of females over 50 now in the workplace, there's a growing need to be able to talk about these issues freely. In 2015, the government stated that women over 50, the population of women over 50, there was less than 20% of them still working, whereas nowadays, due to pension, the cost of living, nearly 80% of women over the age of 50 are still in the workplace. And therefore, it's become a topic of discussion. And let's face it, for many of us, the menopause is tough. It's tough for the women, it's tough for their partners, who also might be women, their families and their work colleagues. So what is the menopause? There's a long list there, but really the menopause represents a key moment in the life of the female human body. It's a time when fertility comes to its natural end and when significant body changes occur that can affect both their physical and mental health. Menopause is triggered by a gradual reduction of the hormonal level due to the failure of our ovaries to produce sufficient estrogen. Now, having done a lot of research on this, I now think that estrogen should be known as a super hormone and that maybe we should all have this all our lives. But menopause occurs either naturally due to age or for external factors. For example, you might have a hysterectomy, or you might have cancer and have chemotherapy, and therefore you lose your estrogen. You might be already aware of the effect that menopause has on our physical and mental health. But also, did you know that once we've gone through menopause, women are more susceptible to chronic diseases seen in later life? In particular, the risk of coronary heart disease and osteoporosis. So, how can exercise help? Okay, so let's look at the more common complaints around the menopause. One of the main complaints that I find with women my age, it talks about brain fog, or as Jaff and so said in 2021, the window of vulnerability for the brain. Brain fog can be termed as poor concentration, confusion, lack of mental clarity, or in my case, putting the milk in the bread bin and putting the bread in the fridge. It's the really most frustrating thing. But if you can't remember events where you've put the keys, then these can be part of brain fog, and as it goes on, it can be linked to depression. So this slide here is looking at two parts of the brain. Number one, the hippocampus, and number two, the amygdala. Now, these can get affected by anything, stress, diet, overworking, but in particular, we notice that there's an increase in problems with both the hippocampus and the amygdala as we age, and in particular when we go through the menopause. So let's look at the hippocampus in particular first. What happens here in this part of the brain is the storage of memory, in really converting short-term memory into long-term memory. It's an area of the brain that gets diminished when we are aging and if we have dementia. So, for example, if my father has dementia, he can play the piano, he can tell you stories of his childhood, but he can't remember, I've just come in and brought him a cup of tea. And that kind of extreme version of the hippocampus tries to explain about how the hippocampus works in order to remember what we did 5 minutes ago, but also to remember directions, orientation, location. Hence, can't find my keys. Not sure on campus where I park my car. Banging into things. Somebody saying, like, don't forget we have a meeting today, and you can't remember anything of it. It also recalls memory. So you can recall facts, you can recall reports that you've done or work that you've done. It recalls emotion, about feeling happy and about feeling joyous. All of these go for a walkabout. The amygdala is also part of our emotional memory and emotional behavior. And both of these areas are affected by menopause. But both of these areas can be improved with exercise. We have something called a telomere. And a telomere is the end part of our DNA. And what a telomere does is a repeated cell of DNA that protects our DNA from fraying and kind of speeding up the aging process. I like to think of it like the plastic little bits on the end of your trainer laces to stop them unraveling. Exercise increases the length of the telomere, protects our brain and our DNA from aging, and also protects our brain from this brain fog. Now, brain fog doesn't have to occur within menopause. It can occur at other times, but there's a significant increase in cognitive function or lack of cognitive function when we go through the menopause. How do we start to go about this? Well, there's a study in 2017 by Hubbard that looked at the susceptibility of depression in menopausal women and the reduction of estrogen and the diminution, excuse my language, maybe I've got brain fog already, of brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And this means increasing your grey matter. Now, when we exercise and we eat well, we can increase our BDNF. When we go through the menopause, BDNF, which is a protein for brain growth, diminishes. Depression is linked to this diminution of BDNF. It's linked to the hippocampus not working well. It's linked to the amygdala not working well. And people who have depression, and depression is very common in menopause, it's very difficult to get over. And what we need to find is a way of making exercise part of your life, not because you want to, be fit and slim like you did maybe when you were in your 20s, but that we use exercise to protect our brain function. People who exercise regularly show approximately 45% lower odds of having depressive symptoms compared to sedentary people. And if you want to qualify what a sedentary person is, then you need to be exercising or being active for less than 150 minutes a week. Now, that is only 20 minutes a day. But in our society, where we tend to drive to work or work from home, and we sit at our desk for 8 to 10 hours a day, then we are more likely to build up, non-positive way of using being active to protect our bodies. What's interesting is that 10 minutes a day can make a huge difference to both menopausal symptoms and to the BDNF in the brain. Most commonly, hot flushes are a kind of a big thing in menopause. And a hot flush can be described as I don't know whether anybody's had a hot flush, but it's like a warm to intense sensation. I used to feel like I was doing a workout, but I was like kind of sitting still in a meeting. And the body temperature can raise by around 5 degrees Celsius when you're having a hot flush. So you have the hot flush, and your body's natural response to heat is, of course, to cool down, hence why you get the heavy sweating. Now, if this happens in the day when you're in work, that can be quite embarrassing, but at night it can be really disconcerting where you can wake up in the night and be covered in sweat, not having any sleep, and then having to go to work the next day. What a study does in 2015 by Bailey and crew, they looked at how does exercise help you deal with a hot flush. And I love this because to me, I like kind of practical ways of making you think about why exercise works. And what they found is when you exercise, you get hot. You get similar symptoms to a hot flush. So you get a red face, you're sweating, your heart rate goes up higher. And you almost kind of build a tolerance towards a hot flush. So they found that exercise wasn't so much that it made a difference to how many hot flushes you had, but it made a difference to how you perceived that to be and how well you coped with it. And it looked at the way that the skin heated up and then cooled down. So if you exercise, you heat your skin up, and you sweat, and you cool down. And that kind of process became more practiced, and therefore you were more able to deal with hot flushes during the menopause if you were a regular exerciser. The next part is called the middle age spread or belly fat. And it's a curse of many menopausal women. Maybe there's a curse of men, but not to do with the menopause. And again, it comes from the reduced estrogen that alters the fat distribution. So more commonly, women tend to hold fat around the upper arms and around the hips. This is more for childbearing. And then as we age, then we tend to hold more of the belly fat in more of an apple shape around the stomach area. This is often called stubborn fat. And that's because it's not the fat you can pinch and inch, but it's the fat that is surrounding your internal organs. So it's quite hard and it's quite difficult to get rid of. When I did my dissertation, part of this was to look at this photo. So here we go. You can join in here. There are different age groups, and this particular age group is aimed for 55 to 60-year-olds. And it's all to do with body image and self-esteem. So you can see the range from number 1 to number 9. And what you have to do for this was, this was part of the questionnaire for people doing my dissertation, was you had to circle which one you thought had the perfect body shape for your age, which one you thought you were, and which one you thought you were capable of achieving. And if there was a difference of more than 2 people within your choice, then that showed that your self-esteem was affected by your body type because A, you didn't believe that you were close enough to the perfect, or you couldn't believe it, or maybe you perceived yourself to look fatter than you were. And this part of the dissertation to do with self-esteem is something that really affects menopausal women who might have been fit and active and, you know, joyously enjoying life, and all of a sudden you're having these body changes, you're having the brain fog, you're having forgetfulness, you're putting on weight, your joints ache. And it's very, very interesting about how exercise can help us with our self-esteem as well. So on safer ground, I will tell you that the regulation of the menstrual cycle, that also estrogen, which is here, plays an important part in your cardiovascular fitness. So cardio, belonging to your heart, vascular, to your circulation of the blood. So estrogen stimulates prostacyclin, which encourages the opening of our arteries and stops the furring up. So when we exercise and we move the blood around our body also releases into the bloodstream to produce energy a lot of fatty acids. It also produces this when we're under stress and we're feeling uncomfortable. And if we don't exercise, we don't use up those fatty acids, and we're more likely to have increased deposits of fat within the blood. And those that deposit within the blood kind of fur up the arteries, which makes women postmenopausal at a higher risk of having heart attacks. This is such an important part because I think that, you know, we often think about being a menopause being within the stage of menopause, about having the hot flushes and the brain fog. But once you come out of menopause, many of those symptoms just disappear. For some people, they don't, but many of those symptoms disappear. But then we have other health issues that exercise can help with. The final one, of course, is bone density, often known as the silent crippler. Bone density here, and you can see on the 2 images between a healthy bone on the left-hand side and a bone that is quite diminished in terms of loss of bone mass that happens quite frequently when we go through menopause. The body continuously recycles bone mass throughout its life, and osteopenia means loss of muscle mass, bone mass, and sarcopenia, the loss of muscle mass, brings about for women a loss of range of motion and strength. Most commonly, people find out that they've got osteoporosis is when they break a bone. And again, estrogen plays an important part in us to enable us to lay down bones so that we keep our bones strong. What we find is that when women start to get older, not only do their own perception of themselves changes, but other people's perception of them changes. So, for example, I'm 60 in about 3 months' time, and people say to me, oh, don't you think you need to slow down? Or, you know, are you sure you should be lifting weights? And this kind of attitude is not helpful, because what we need to be doing is to continue to stress the bone through weight training. Weight training causes a pressure on the bone itself, which increases its bone density. So if we're losing bone density quickly as we go through menopause, then women really need to get back into the gym or do more weight-bearing exercises in order to enable them to live a happier, healthier lifestyle without osteoporosis. Osteoporosis can affect posture as the bones of the spine crumble. That also has an effect on the internal organs and the pelvic floor. So there are many things that are positive about exercise and how exercise helps us through the menopause, which is a transitional phase for women. And where we see this thing of 50% of women over 60 will have one fracture, but we find that once women have had a fracture, then they are more likely to become less active because they're more worried about falling. Whereas we know that exercise can help us with balance as well as bone density, which means our likelihood of falling is also reduced. So what can we do? Here we go. Let's have a look at the more positive side. So we know in general that exercise has an important role for both physical, that is to do with your body, and mental, that is to do with the depression. And you need to have what's called a system of regular exercise and good diet in order to enable us to lead a life that is pain-free, that you are able to move, that you can enjoy everything in life, without having the problems of the menopause. We need to exercise around 30 to 40 minutes on a daily basis. Weight bearing is recommended. Vigorous or resistance exercises can often produce very good results. However, you can also use just 10 minutes a day of walking. If you are not into, sweating, if you've never been that kind of person, then you don't want to do that. So number one, first thing I'm going to tell you, if you want to start to think about exercising, is to start to buy a bigger pair of trainers. What happens as we get older is our bones and our joints spread, and you tend to have wider feet. So buy the bigger pair of shoes, because your feet are also going to swell, because we don't deal with the sweating and the extra transportation of blood. Same thing, you need to buy some extra pair of socks, good socks with good arch supports, and buy a better bra, because I'm sorry, them boobs, they're not the same. Quite a lot of women will not take water or drink water with them, because one of the other things that happens is within the muscle is that the muscle of the pelvic floor never quite works the same after we've been through the menopause. And we can have what's called urge or stress incontinence. So urge incontinence is you're all fine up until you get to the door of the toilet, and then you're already going to the toilet before you're sitting down. Sorry about this is too personal. And then stress incontinence is where you laugh, cough, sneeze, jump, run. And we have that incontinence that we don't want to talk about. And so people will then start to reduce the amount that they drink, because they're thinking I don't need to, I don't want this to happen. So we can try to think about maybe eating more food that includes more fiber and water that slows down the absorption of water. So things like strawberries and apples and grapes. Osteoporosis, we talked about fragility, fracture. So try and do some weight-bearing exercises, but also try to do something a bit more flexible. So think about Pilates or yoga or any kind of stretching things. So joint pain in menopause can affect your knees, your shoulders, your neck, your elbow, your hips, your hands. We see an increase in arthritis as we go through the menopause. Or we might find that old injury starts to niggle. And what happens is because estrogen has what's called a protective anti-inflammation effect. Now, there are certain foodstuffs that also have an anti-inflammatory effect. Go onto the arthritis website. They've got loads of information on food that you can do that. So try to think about keeping flexible, eating food that's not going to inflame your body. We want to exercise and we want to get hot, but we also know that you don't want to overheat when we're doing too much in the throes of menopause. So try and think about ways to keep cool, keep your ice water with you, shove it down your t-shirt if you're hot, put it on your head, it doesn't really matter. The other thing you can think about is trying some of this cold water immersion. What we know from cold water immersion, that it increases brown fat deposits, so you're more likely to be able to control the belly fat. It reduces inflammation and improves recovery. Sometimes exercise doesn't have to be hard. There are many benefits to walking, and 10 minutes a day is enough. But finally, I'm going to finish on a more cheery note. In 2020, a group of scientists looked at the effect of beer, in particular, the part of beer and whether increased abdominal fat, osteoporosis, and body hydration in women. And they found that beer did not increase abdominal fat. It actually helped osteoporosis. And most importantly, had this amazing ingredient called a polyphenol, can't even say it, which is also present in non-alcoholic beer if you want to try it. It's also present in food as well, such as blueberries and dark green veg. So it's not to say you can rush to the pub, but I know many people find it a challenge to drink sufficient water to remain hydrated. Lower estrogen, as we go through the menopause, affects our thirst driver. So we find that we're not as thirsty as we used to, and we find it difficult to remember to drink. And this can put a strain both on your heart, but also having a urinary infection, which is far more common in women. So if you fancy that you need to hydrate, then don't forget, beer has also been shown to be a marvellous way to hydrate and helps you through the menopause. But more importantly, I'm going to end with a quote for my soon-to-be rewritten dissertation. If peri- and postmenopausal women can be encouraged to take part in exercise, they should experience direct benefits to their general health and a reduction in their adverse menopausal symptoms. So that is exercise, menopause and me. I hope you've enjoyed. Hope it's giving you food for thought. Diolch yn fawr.